Hello, this is Hanif Muhammad. Welcome to our YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be reviewing Watchmen. In my opinion, the greatest superhero story ever told. Watchmen is based on the critically acclaimed graphic novel of the same name. It is in fact the only graphic novel that's on Time Magazine's 100 Best Novels of the 20th Century. It is a book that revolutionized the entire comic book industry. So the movie had a lot to live up to. The hype for this movie was through the roof. Some people had so many different expectations for what this movie should be, for how it should be executed, for how the characters should be done, and the atmosphere and the tone. There were so many different things that people had going into the movie that were fans of the comic book. And non-fans just kind of saw it as another superhero movie. They didn't know what they were getting themselves into. They didn't know that this is the end of superheroes as we know it. This movie is basically what would happen if superheroes would really exist in the real world. Like, what would happen if they really affected history? What happened to the presidency? What happened to government? What happened to politics? This movie, what happened is, this movie has so many different philosophical questions about nature, reality, and metaphysics, and all these sorts of big ideas, big questions. They're all answered and asked within this movie. And within the original comic book, it's gone into greater detail. It's a movie that is deeper than pretty much any other superhero story out there for that reason. It's a movie that I have seen numerous times, at least 50, maybe 60 or 70. I've seen this movie so many times from beginning to end. And, sometimes I was turn on my favorite scene in the movie and watch it and really absorb the meaning behind it and the depth and the power behind it. There's so much to this movie. It stands up to any superhero story, any superhero movie that's out today. In fact, with the exception of The Dark Knight and like the original Batman from 1989, this is my favorite superhero movie. It's a movie that's so deep, well-rounded, enjoyable, has amazing characters, an amazing cast. These actors are on their A game. The direction is stunning. Zack Snyder really outdone himself with this movie. Zack Snyder is he's a director that a lot of people hate on. A lot of people think that Zack Snyder is a hack, or they call him Hack Snyder. They diss him for things like obvious blunders like Batman vs Superman, which was a very flawed movie, and Justice League, which I thought was a train wreck. But with this movie, in my opinion, he's earned my respect with Watchmen. He's shown with given great material, given a competent story, a competent script, Zack Snyder can make magic. And in my opinion, that's what this movie, Watchmen, is. One of my favorite movies of all time. And I can't wait to share that with you. Our movie begins as a murder mystery. Right from the start of the film, we are introduced to the comedian, played by Jeffrey Dean Morgan, real name Edward Blake. He is an astounding character, a very unique, compelling character. As much of an anti-hero as he is a villain, as much of a cornerstone of the plot as he is anything else, as any other character. The movie begins with a mysterious masked figure, bursting into the room, besting one-on-one combat, and throwing him off a building, right through glass. He tumbles, falling to his death. An iconic image of the movie, we see his pin, the smiley face pin, with some blood splattered on it. This is a key image from the movie that represents the loss of innocence, which is a big theme throughout the novel and the movie. We are then shown the opening credits of the movie. And the opening credits for this movie are some of the best opening credits, some of my favorite opening credits I've ever seen. A montage is shown playing the classic Bob Dylan song, The Times They Are Changing, in which we see the passage of time throughout this world, this alternate 1985 world where the Cold War is still happening. There's so much in here, so much content, so much exploration of the idea of superheroes really being among us. We see Dr. Manhattan, the super proud character in the movie, shaking hands with John F. Kennedy. We see Kennedy being assassinated by the comedian. We see the rising of an old group of superheroes called the Minutemen in the 1940s. And we also see the rise of the new group of heroes that will be focused on this movie. They're called the Watchmen, our main protagonists. And there's so much in this opening that is really fascinating from a social perspective, from a political perspective. It's everything. We see an outright lesbian character, the silhouette, kissing a woman, and then we see her dead, an attack, a homophobic attack against her. We see many of the superheroes dying, some of them going insane, like Mothman going insane. We see Dollar Bill being gunned down, which is what actually inspired the Incredibles to basically do the whole no capes rule, where basically capes can get you killed. There's so much in this opening few minutes, like 3 minutes of the movie, but does wonders for the rest of the story. It really shows Zack Snyder's skills as a director. It shows that he has a vision, but give him the right tools, Zack Snyder can make that vision a reality. After the opening credits, you're introduced to Rorschach, probably the main character of this movie, arguably between the main one that gets most attention, arguably is Rorschach. And he's definitely the fan favorite of the bunch, including me. He's also my favorite character. As you can see, he is a fascinating and supremely badass character. So much about him that I can talk about why I love him so much is it's all throughout the movie. From his opening dialogue, his opening statement. All the whores and politicians look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll look down and whisper, "No." Just, love it. I just love it. And, this is, some people criticize say it's very self-important. This guy who takes himself, too seriously. And yeah, that's part of it, but that's part of the unique thing, the interesting thing about him is that he takes himself so seriously. And everybody else is so aware of this, but like he himself, it's almost like he isn't aware of it, but he's aware of so many other things that makes him that way. The world has screwed him over. So he feels it's his job to screw it over back. And that retribution, that feeling, that righteous anger that guides him throughout the story, basically the backbone of this movie. The first character we see him interact with is a character named Daniel Dryberg, who used to be the second Night Owl, after Hollis Mason. Hollis Mason was part of the Minutemen, the first group of superheroes, and Night Owl, took up the mantle. He looked up to Hollis Mason because his father wasn't really there for him as much. So, he found a man that was like him, that became like his father figure. And he was Daniel was a genius, and so he made a bunch of, kind of like Batman, he made a lot of different gadgets and a lot of different, he made a vehicle, an owl ship. And he became a crime fighter, and he used to work with Rorschach, in fact. And those two were buddies for a while, but, eventually the group disbanded. There's a law that was enacted called the Keene Act, which basically banished superheroes from working. And so Night Owl kind of lost his purpose. He kind of lost almost like his manlyhood in a way. A lot of this movie, the way I see it, is about masculinity and about how these men really are able to feel like men, how they express masculinity in both positive and negative ways. And we see, when Rorschach and Daniel interact with each other, there's a part of Daniel that's longing for where Rorschach is. Part of him also fears it. Part of him is not brave enough, but also in a way more sensible. He doesn't want to. Deep down he wants to, but he knows, he feels like he shouldn't act out the way Rorschach does. And in a classic exchange between two characters, Daniel asks Rorschach about the old times, that what happened to them, and Rorschach replies, "You quit." And Daniel hears this, sits down, takes off his glasses, and just kind of soaks up the feeling, soaks up those words. He's so lost without the suit, without Night Owl. Daniel's lost. In the next major scene in the movie, we meet Adrian Veidt. His costume name was Ozymandias. He's also a rich guy, like Daniel, much more than Daniel. He's considered to be the smartest man on the planet, and he has a vision to unite the world. This is where we get to actually spoiler territory. If you haven't seen the movie, be sure to turn it off at a certain point because I will be spoiling the ending. Daniel tells Adrian about comedian's death and what Rorschach told him. Basically, that the comedian was assassinated in Rorschach's view. Rorschach is kind of viewed as a conspiracy nutcase by, a lot of the team, especially Adrian. Adrian dismisses the whole idea and says the comedian was basically a Nazi. The comedian had it coming, which is true when you get to know him more. Basically, Adrian sweeps everything under the rug and basically says, "You got something more important to worry about." And this is where we get introduced to once again, we get more information about the threat of nuclear war. We're in the middle of the Cold War. It's 1985, but alternative 1985. This is a world where we actually won the Vietnam War. And now when we're in the war with the Russians, and both sides, the Soviet Union and the United States have nuclear weapons, and we are at 5 minutes till midnight, until the symbolic clock reaches doomsday, until everything is annihilated. Adrian tells Daniel basically that the Soviets have so many warheads stockpiled that even if Dr. Manhattan was somehow to wave his hand and wipe out the majority of them, the few that are left could still annihilate the entire planet. This is a dire situation. And it's made very clear by Adrian's words. In the next scene, Rorschach, he goes and meets Laurie, played by Malin Ackerman, and also John Osterman, aka Dr. Manhattan, who is the one character that has superpowers. They are in a relationship together. They are living on a government base because Dr. Manhattan actually works for the United States as their weapon, as the nuclear deterrent, as the one force they have, keeping the Russians at bay, keeping the Russians scared. Rorschach goes to tell both Laurie and John about basically the comedian's death. Neither of them are very concerned with it, but it does Rorschach presents the possibility that maybe someone's gunning after masks, someone's gunning after these heroes, that the death of the comedian wasn't an accident, that it was all for intended purpose. But Dr. Manhattan doesn't want to hear any of it. He teleports Rorschach away, and then afterwards we get to see a very brief, exchange between Laurie and John. We see that Laurie is doesn't have really feeling connection with him, that John is really a hollow shell of a man that he used to be. And we see this juxtaposed with her interactions with Daniel when she goes out with Daniel and goes to basically have a few laughs and talk as friends and that type of thing. That she connects much more with Daniel, someone like Daniel, basically a good guy, wholesome guy, versus the more powerful, more attractive, dangerous guy that she liked. And that kind of to me is like a comment on kind of how women kind of mature at times. Um, Daniel was someone that she didn't really give much of a second look to in the beginning. He's kind of a dork. He's kind of a dweeb and a nerd, but he's also a very gentle soul. He's also someone that is a very wholesome guy. What you see is what you get. You have to second guess with him. With Dr. Manhattan, you do have to second guess him. In order for Billy Crudup to play this character of Dr. Manhattan, he had to essentially remove so much of his emotions and distill to very base, a single voice, but a single voice that would pinpoint the dilemma of this character. And that must have been a real challenge for Billy Crudup. But I compliment him. I give him the utmost praise for being able to pull it off. For example, there's the scene when they first interact with each other, John and Lori. John already, he tells her he knows that she's gonna call Daniel, and she's gonna want to spend the night with Daniel since John no longer cares about going out. And you can just see it as a slight when he says it. You can see like a slight wave of almost sadness in his voice when he says it, but it's masked with a degree of like unconcern. But it's just a perfect tone for that character. The next character that we meet before this journey really begins is Lori's mother, Sally Jupiter, played by Carla Gugino. She is a worn-out woman. She's a woman who was a part of the Minutemen, the first group of superheroes. She was like a superstar, sex icon, someone that was celebrated, praised for her body, but essentially now is living in an old retirement home, worn out, washed out. Rorschach calls her a bloated aging whore. Let's see. Rorschach calls her a bloated aging whore. Died in California rest resort. That's how he likes to put things. But basically, she's a very relatable, understandable character. She's learned so much. She's, unlike her daughter, she knows a bit more about the world. Lori is still very naive, and you can see it in her interactions with her mother that Lori doesn't quite get it. Lori she sees the image of her in a porn magazine, of her mother in a porn magazine, and just is so disgusted, like, oh, I can't believe you would degrade yourself this way. And Sally's like, well, I can get mad at that, or I can just accept that, hey, people were flattered by me. Men wanted me, at least. At least that's something, And we also, this is the first time we learned about the comedian's funeral. She already knows that he's dead. And her first remark is, poor Eddie. And Lori can't believe that her own mother would say something about, Lori can't believe that her own mother would say something like this about the comedian. A man who, and this is the first big shocker of the story, tried to rape Sally Jupiter, tried to rape her mother way back when they were Minutemen, before Lori was born, when the comedian and her both were part of the Minutemen. Edward Blake tried to rape Sally. He beat her, told her that she wanted it, pinned her to the ground, and was only stopped by hooded justice. One of the first, actually, masked heroes in this story. She was left humiliated by this. She was left absolutely humiliated by this event, and yet she was humiliated by this event, and yet somehow Sally still finds it in her heart to feel compassion for this man. Why is that? And the next scene, one of my favorite scenes of the whole movie, one of my absolute favorite scenes is the funeral scene. The funeral flashbacks in Watchmen are one of those scenes where I rewatch over and over and over again. because there's so much depth, so much character development, character exploration, philosophical exploration that's being explored in these three sequences. Basically split up in three. You have John Osterman, the Dr. Manhattan at the funeral. You have Daniel Dreiberg at the funeral, and you have Adrian Veidt at the funeral. So yeah, Billy Crudup, Patrick Wilson, and Matthew Good, all there thinking about the comedian and the effect that the comedian had on their lives, which is monumental. And in Dr. Manhattan's flashback, they're actually at Vietnam. Both the comedian and Dr. Manhattan were at the Vietnam War together. They fought and killed together. And basically, won the Vietnam War because of Dr. Manhattan. Comedians kind of celebrating this. And then all of a sudden we see, during the celebration, we see a pregnant Vietnamese woman come up to him with a baby, with his baby, asking him, what are we going to do about this? Pleading with him. Very human interaction, very human emotion. And the comedian just brushed her off. Part of him knows that he's in the wrong, but part of him is also being real and genuine. And you can't help but at least admire, or not admire, but at least respect the comedian's upfront about who he is and about the situation and about what he knows about life. That's one thing about the comedian. And we do not feel like Watchmen actually is a very conservative. If Watchmen was any type of political, Watchmen is kind of apolitical because it criticizes everybody, no matter what side you stand. It criticizes all kinds of ideas. But if anything, Watchmen might be more right than left wing, arguably, because of its kind of stance on certain topics. But basically, you have this Vietnamese woman, slashes the comedian with a beer bottle. She breaks the bottle, slashes him with the sharp end of it, leaving his face permanently scarred. The comedian is instantly, overwhelmed with anger, rage. This evil, dark energy within him explodes, and he shoots her, guns her down in a moment of blind rage. And Dr. Manhattan, before he did it, Dr. Manhattan said, comedian, don't. The comedian did anyway. And Dr. Manhattan is just looking at the dead body and was like, she was a pregnant woman, he gunned her down, with disbelief. But then the comedian wisely responds, yeah, and you watched me. You could have turned the gun to steam, bolts to mercury, or the bottom to goddamn snowflakes, but you didn't, did you? And that's her very powerful statement here. Like, what the comedian did was wrong, obviously. But I would say not the ultimate evil per se. We'll get to the ultimate evil. The ultimate act of evil in this movie will occur much later. But this is a very, very relatable type of evil that he did. It's something that is wrong and abhorrent, obscene, but it's a moment of uncontrolled, blind anger, rage, and passion. Uncontrolled, there's a moment of, you just lose yourself in your emotions. Totally different, something that's a premeditated murder, or something that's like, or different than Dr. Manhattan, who is overwhelmed with apathy, who doesn't care. Who's really worse? Who's really the bad guy in the scenario when Dr. Manhattan could have stopped it, but logically, he has all the faculties in him, but he won't stop it. Why is he so out of touch? But there's a logic behind why he's out of touch too. There's a logic behind Dr. Manhattan and why he feels the way he does. That's what's so fascinating about this movie. This movie shows you every single perspective on these issues. And they're all valid perspectives in so many ways. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. Next, we get to Adrian Veidt's backstory with the comedian, in which we actually see the whole team. Night Owl, Spectre, me and Lori, Rorschach, and we see Dr. Manhattan show up with his girlfriend Janie, and we have comedian, and we have Ozymandias, Adrian Veidt. Adrian Veidt is trying to lead this team, and solve the world's problems and be the smartest man in the world, as he's often called, and rise to the challenge. Comedian mocks him, belittles him, tells him he's a joke, tells him he doesn't understand how the world really is. That it takes a moron, takes a room full of morons to actually think that the world's problems are small enough for him to handle. It is a huge wake-up call for Ozymandias. And there's so many amazing lines by the comedian in this scene that really illustrate how he sees the world, how he sees this conflict, how this conflict with the Russians, this internal conflict of the Watchmen matches the external conflict of the war against the Russians so well. That the way comedian feels about his character, the way he feels about life, is reflected in this conflict with the Russians. That the world's a joke. That, and I quote, "Justice comes to all of us, no matter what we do." This applies to the war. In fact, this war for the comedian is proof that it's all pointless. That you might as well just be a nihilist, because existential nihilist or a moral nihilist, any type of nihilist will go, because none of it matters anyway, according to the comedian. In the last flashback, we have the comedian with Night Owl, Daniel, during police riots, actually, because, the citizens at a certain point, the citizens got fed up with the costume vigilantes. They wanted the cops back. They didn't want any more costume vigilantes, fighting on their behalf. They wanted law and order back. So the comedian, being the comedian, decided to disrupt the riots, attack the rioters, shoot them down. And I've heard some Republicans make comments to these like SJWs of back then. Like, yeah, that's an interesting point. They kind of are, arguably, but the comedian is someone who, doesn't really care. He will just be an asshole to anybody, and he disrupts the riots. He attacks everybody. He tells Daniel about how it's great to be back in the field. It's great to be back, and you might as well savor it because guess what? The Keene Act. He's already warning him ahead of time. The Keene Act is coming. Costume vigilante is going to be a thing of the past. They're going to outlaw it, except for the comedian. Actually, the comedian and Dr. Manhattan actually go free, because since they work for the government can use them. Just against the law for vigilantes to act on their own behalf. Daniel's looking at all this madness and saying to himself, saying just to comedian and everybody else, to the audience actually, what happened to the American dream? Why is all this war and fighting? And this turns so well to today. We have these big scale conflicts between liberals and liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans, and against Trump and for Trump, and all this madness, and with Korean War that's going on now, not Korean War, but the potential conflict with Korea, or anything that's going on now in politics. It all is very relevant. That's the thing, is this story is so timeless. This story is absolutely, it can apply to any time in our history. But that's all I'll do for now. Later on, I'll go into more detail about the plot and about the characters of Watchmen, and why I feel like Watchmen is a timeless story that needs to be revisited, no matter what decade you're watching it in.